So I wanted to go back to what you mentioned before, which is this idea, because I think maybe some pushback might come from the idea that if you're in a position of leadership, the things you have to offer up are not commensurate with what the privileges you receive. And then you mentioned that the thing you actually get is purpose. And as soon as you said that, I wrote down the word resources, because I do think that when you're in a position of leadership and you're good, but in a position of, and you are also a good leader, right? Simultaneously, let's go back to conflating leadership with the positions and being in a position of power or desire of that.
Yeah.
The benefit is that you do get higher access to resource, because that's part of leading.
You have to have access to resource.
Exactly.
Because otherwise you can't do your job.
Exactly.
Including human resource.
Exactly. That's what leadership is.
Yes.
Leadership is amassing resource of some kind.
Yes.
In order to get things accomplished or to direct people in certain ways.
But by definition, it's outsized power. Like you have more power than one person should have. That's what you have as a leader, both power over people as human resources and actual resource.
Yep.
And that's what we push back in our culture when we don't like the idea, oh, that person shouldn't be in leadership. It's because they have more power than we are comfortable with. But if they're a good leader, they wield that power appropriately and they don't harm anybody and they step down when it's the right time. Like they don't hold on to it longer than they should.
Yes, which is the direction I want to go. So outsized power, outsized, access to resource. That's exactly it. Now, you said they have more power than one person should have. I know
in people's heads.
In people's heads,
yeah,
exactly.
Like people believe that about a leader.
Right. If a person is a good leader, though, they have exactly the amount of resource that a single person should have.
Yes.
They have the amount of resource that a leader should have. And even in that situation, if they are a good leader, I would still say that your statement holds true, that the privileges and the access to outsized resource is still not commensurate with the position, because there's a lot of stuff that comes with being a leader that is very, very thankless.
Yeah.
Like you get all the criticism, you get all the responsibility. Like you can't do enough to make it so that everybody's happy with you. You are going to get criticized. It's just part, like you have to build a thick skin if you're a leader, because you are going to get a bunch of criticism. And I mean, who knows what percentage of it is completely unqualified criticism?
Well, not just criticism, but projection of ill intent, which is a very particular kind of criticism. You're ill-intended. You're trying to harm people. You're trying to hurt others, which is really hard to hear.
Yep. And you also get all the responsibility for the outcome. This idea that things have become too big to fail, this is a very new idea, I think, to some extent. And only because everything is so interconnected.
Yeah.
But for a long time, there's been a whole history of people who are at the top of the food chain socially, like monarchs and kings and queens, that people didn't like what they did, and then they just kind of removed them from the gene pool, right? They're like, okay, you're done. We're not happy with you anymore. And so the people in positions of leadership are in high positions of responsibility. They have to account for their actions. And if they don't do the job, along with all of that criticism and, projection of ill intent, right, they're done. It's complete. So that stack of resource, right, which could include things like money, but it also includes status. It includes credibility, right? I had attention and human energy written down as well. You get an outsized amount of attention. You get an outsized amount of human energy at your disposal. But despite the fact that you get all of these resources, you have to make sure that you're using them well. Just like if you get everybody's attention and you have no place to point them to, people will get really salty about that. They'll be like, I paid you attention. Yeah. I paid it, right? So what are you going to do in return? I expect that you're going to send me a direction because I am without direction. And that's what leaders are supposed to do, is they're supposed to help you have direction.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to do that. It's very hard to galvanize people together to make something bigger happen, whatever that might be. It's hard to traverse a territory and then come back and say, I know the way, particularly since we're in a time period in history where there's so much undiscovered country, so to speak. There's so much terrain that nobody's explored.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of pattern recognition that's necessary. We might not have even seen things like this yet. It's a totally new landscape. And yet we still need leaders bringing us to the next place, which is probably why we're really suffering and lacking solid leadership. Because it's hard to go, I'll be a leader when we're entering undiscovered, territory or country, knowing that you're going to get all the criticism and the projection of ill intent, and you don't even have the certainty to go, and I know I'm going to get to the other side because I've been here before.
Yeah.
So that idea of purpose, why would anybody do it then, right? If it's such a pain and there's not that much benefit, resource, yes, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily getting a ton of benefit from that situation. Usually you have to, outsized resource comes with outsized working hours and outsized criticism and responsibility, etc. Then why would a person do it? And the answer, you mentioned the answer before, is purpose. Yeah. It has to be fulfilling. It has to be something that the person's like, this is what I was meant to do. Yeah. And you were talking about profile training, which at the beginning of this episode, I was like, I don't really like responsibility of leadership. I'm not really a big fan of leadership. I don't think about it because I don't really like it and I don't really want to be there. And yet at profile training, it's, we're both leading from a stage. We're both running this conference. And I can't help but deny that I'm in a position of leadership in all of that. But it doesn't feel like all the bad stuff that usually comes with it because it feels like purpose. Yeah. It's like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, so I guess I just have to keep doing that. It doesn't matter whether or not we just broke even on that event. Or it doesn't matter if at the end of it I'm exhausted, but I still got to go home to a kid who might be missing me. Or I've been there with Piper in tow the whole week and I'm kind of exhausted. It doesn't matter. It's what I'm supposed to be doing, so I have to keep doing it.